Especially after the last few years, people are understandably focused on their health and wellness. But according to Dr. Gabor Mate, our collective health seems to be deteriorating. From chronic illnesses to addiction and mental health, all is not well. His new book aims to untangle what he sees as a problem much larger than our personal health struggles and mark a better path forward. Written with his son Daniel, the book is called The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And Dr. Gabor Mate joins us now from Victoria, British Columbia for more. It's great to have you back on our program. How are you doing these days?
I'm very well, a bit fatigued in my voice from all the speaking I've been doing on this interminable book tour, but otherwise I'm doing great. Thank you. It's nice to be with you again.
Well, that's a good sign. If you've got a sore throat because so many people are interested in this book, that's a good sign. Let's start with this, Dr. Mate, and that is you open the book with quite a conundrum. We live in a culture that is obsessed with health, and yet you say our collective health is deteriorating. What prompts you to come to that conclusion?
Statistics. The number of people with anxiety is rising. The number of children being diagnosed with all manner of mental health conditions and being medicated for it is rising in this country and throughout the globalized Western world. The number of people with autoimmune disease is rising. Canada leads the world, I think, in Crohn's disease amongst young people. The number of people dying of drug overdoses is rising. During COVID, the number of people being addicted went up. So, but by all manner, the number of people on medications for all kinds of health conditions is going up. So, by all manner of statistics, and as my observation as a trained physician, our collective health is getting worse.
Can you make sense of that paradox, though? If we're obsessed with our personal health, how is it our collective health is getting so bad?
Part of the limitations of the Western medical view, for all its amazing achievements and technological marvels and surgical miracles, is nevertheless that we see health as an individual issue relegated to particular organs or an isolated person. But actually, from the scientific point of view, health is not a matter of individual concern, but has to do with our interpersonal relationships with other people and the entire culture that we live in. So looking at health from say something like the loneliness epidemic. Now, loneliness is rising in the Western world statistically, and loneliness, extreme loneliness, is as much of a risk factor for chronic illness and early death as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But loneliness is not an individual phenomenon. It's a social phenomenon that's been rising in the Western world for the last 40 years. Same with something like obesity. The rates of obesity in the Western world are going up. Those are not individual decisions that have to do with stress and the kind of food that people are sold and the kind of ways that people use eating as a way of dealing with their emotional problems. These are all social issues. The fact that women have 70 or 80% of autoimmune disease is not a biological gender issue. It has to do with the stress on women. The fact that in Canada, an Indigenous woman has 6 times the rate of rheumatoid arthritis than that of anybody else. This is in a population that never used to have rheumatoid arthritis, is not an individual problem. It's a social problem, one of long-term trauma and colonialism and present-day deprivation. So these are all social questions. They're not individual questions.
Well, let me pick up on that indigeneity angle there. Does it go without saying that race and gender and so on have a significant, an additional significance in all of what you're talking about?
Yes. The more stressed people are, either in their personal lives or as a result of social conditions or both, the more at risk they are for illness. So if women are more at risk for chronic illness than men are, and Indigenous people are even more risk. Now, when you get the intersectionality of gender and race, then you have increased risk. And so both in the United States and in Canada, people of color, and particularly women, are at much higher risk for chronic illness. And again, Indigenous or women of color are at significantly higher risk statistically, and this has been known for decades. These are not individual problems, they're social problems. An American Black woman, for example, the more experience of racism she has to endure, the higher the risk for asthma. So is that asthma? Is the inflammation of her airways an individual problem in an isolated organ, or is it a social malaise? Well, clearly, it's a combination of both.
Does it seem to you that the institutions in our country that are responsible for improving this situation care enough to do anything about it?
I'm not going to accuse anybody of not caring, but I will say that whether they care or not, they're utterly ignorant of the basic issues. For example, in this book, I gather the evidence linking trauma, for example, and adult illness, both of mind and body, whether we're talking about chronic physical illness, for example. A Canadian study showed that men who were sexually abused in childhood have triple the risk of heart attacks as adults. And the same statistics can be shown about trauma and addiction, trauma and mental health. A British psychologist, a member of the British Academy, Dr. Richard Bentall, said that the link between childhood trauma and adult mental health illness is as strongly proven scientifically as the link between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. But Steve, the average medical student in Canada, shocking to say, doesn't receive a single lecture on trauma and its connection to adult illness. Unbelievable. Given the tens of thousands of research papers, I cite some of them in the book, linking trauma and all manner of conditions of body and mind, the average medical student doesn't get a single lecture about it.
Why not?
It's almost unfathomable. Why not? Because the Western medicine, again, for all its incredible achievements, and I'm certainly, as trained in Western medicine, I can only marvel at the amazing accomplishments of my profession. But at the same time, it makes the mistake of separating mind from the body. So it doesn't understand that people's emotional lives and therefore their social lives are actually connected to their physiology. This is despite the fact that great physicians throughout history have recognized these links. Canada's own Sir William Osler said in 1890 that rheumatoid arthritis is a stress-driven disease. Since he's made that comment, there's been so much research proving the accuracy of his observation. The average rheumatologist doesn't know a thing about that research because we separate the mind from the body. So when you go to a neurologist or a rheumatologist or any kind of a specialist, they'll never ask you about trauma, stress, your personal relationships, even though physiologically these are all connected to what's happening to the biology of your body.
Well, you do make a distinction between, let's call it uppercase T trauma and lowercase t trauma.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, it's only to distinguish the events that cause the trauma. And the trauma itself means a wound. So people can be wounded in a number of ways. Trauma is a psychic wound that leaves an impact in the body, in the nervous system, in the brain. And those imprints show up in the form of dysfunctions, anxieties, depressions, physical illness, and so on later on in life, as voluminous research has beyond the shadow of a doubt demonstrated. In terms of what causes trauma, it can be two types. It can be the big T, which is the easily identifiable terrible things that do happen to children, such as physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Look at the indigenous population and its experience in the residential schools, for example, and the outcomes of that in mental health and suicide and addictions and physical illness. So those are the big T ones, or a war, a tsunami, the death of a parent, violence in the family, a parent dying, a parent being jailed. These are what we call the big T traumas. But kids can also be wounded, not because terrible things happen to them, but because the right things that should happen don't happen. In other words, if children's needs are not met, and children have certain definable evolutionary dictated emotional needs for healthy development, if those needs are not met, as they're not in the society, children can be wounded. And those developmental events is what I call small T trauma. For example, you can hit a child and beat them and the effects are predictable. You can spank them, as some psychologists, some very well-known psychologists in Canada still advocate, despite all the evidence that spanking is as harmful as a more severe form of physical abuse. Or you can just not pick a small child up when they're crying and they need your attention, they need the physical contact. Now you tell a mother gorilla not to pick up their baby when they're crying, but we tell human mothers all the time not to pick up their babies. that traumatizes the child. That wounds the child.
But
That
the
wound will show up later on in life.
But the way you have described it suggests to me, anyway, that it is impossible to live a trauma-free life. If you look at, I mean, clearly not everybody's going to experience capital T trauma, but probably everybody is going to at least experience lowercase t trauma. And if that's the case, are we a society of damaged goods 24/7?
I don't call anybody damaged because I see the possibility of healing. Thank God I've experienced it myself and I've witnessed it and have helped others achieve it. So I don't use the word damaged, but you're quite right. There are very few people in this society, because of the way we raise children, because of the stress on parents, because of the multi-generational trauma. Look, even a simple thing like the current economic crisis with inflation, as is going up in Canada right now, a Canadian study showed that women who's under economic stress, their children have abnormal stress hormone levels, excuse me, which means that the parents' financial stresses translate into physiological impact on the child's body. So in this society, there are very few of us who escape without some degree of trauma. Of course, there's degrees of it, there's variations of it, but most of us are wounded and we don't recognize it sufficiently.
Well, let's, if I can, pluck an example of the last 2.5 years during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. And I wonder if, can I say this with any degree of certainty, that those who succumbed to this disease or experienced deteriorating mental health circumstances as a result of everything that is associated with COVID, did those who experienced the worst of COVID experience the worst of it, in your judgment, because at some point earlier in their life, they have had unresolved trauma?
You know, there's a lot to that. First of all, again, let's look at who was most at risk for COVID. It was people of color, of minorities, and people stressed and living under poor economic conditions. So we kept saying that we're all in this together, but we weren't in all together. There was a social gradient as to who got COVID or who was the most threatened by it. Now, some families, under the impact of COVID, where they had to socially isolate, spend time together, they actually got stronger. Parents actually got closer to their kids. But families where there was stress already, particularly childhood trauma, those families, the stress of COVID would have exacerbated the unresolved traumas. And so, for example, the number of children being abused went up during COVID, family violence went up, people using drugs went up. So that it depends, when a stressor like COVID happens, those that are well-resourced, they'll do reasonably well, but those already stressed by previous trauma, you'll expect them to do worse and to have long-term consequences, for sure.
Well, I think the group that was most disproportionately affected by COVID was those over 80 years old. They certainly disproportionately died more than anybody else. Is that to say that their lifetimes of trauma, which would have been presumably more than younger people, helped contribute to the fact that they died in bigger numbers?
I don't think I would jump to that conclusion. I mean, age itself brings a diminishing of your immune responses, reduced capacity of the body to fight off infection and to stay resilient. So I think age itself is simply a risk factor in and of itself. I don't know that I would bring trauma into that particular mix.
Okay, understood. You are, I have to say, in all the interviews I've seen with you, you're quite open about your own personal challenges and your own travails over the course of your life. I don't want to pry too much, but if you'd care to share some things that might give some inspiration to others, given that you seem to be managing these travails relatively well, maybe this is the time to do that.
You're not prying. I mean, I'm very open about this stuff. The fact is that as a Jewish infant born just before the Nazis occupied Hungary, I was a very traumatized infant. My mother, having lost her parents in Auschwitz, my father being away in forced labor, the conditions we lived under were simply atrocious and life-threatening. And at some point, she gave me to a stranger in a street in Budapest where I stood just a week ago on the very spot to to send me to safety. So I didn't see her for 5 or 6 weeks. And all that year left me with a tremendous sense of stress, anxiety, a sense that I wasn't lovable, a sense that I wasn't wanted, because why else would my mother give me to a stranger when I'm 11 months old? And those stresses showed up later on in my life in my workaholism, where as a physician, I had to keep proving how important I was by working so hard, which meant I wasn't available to my own children as a emotionally available, present, grounded adult, which means I passed on my traumas onto my children. And so I'm very open about that because people, this is how it works. And we pass on our traumas not because we mean to, but simply because we can't help it until we work them out.
At what point in your life did you realize that's what was going on in your life? You were therefore able to logically analyze it and do something about it.
Yeah, well, I was in my 40s. I was a successful physician, quite respected, writing for various newspapers like the Vancouver Sun and the Globe and Mail quite regularly. Everything was going well, but I was depressed. My marriage was very conflictual, and my children were afraid of me. And at some point, I had to ask, despite the fact that I loved them so much, you know, and at some point, I had to ask myself, well, what's going on here? And I wish I could say it was a matter of simple logical analysis. I think healing is a bit more complex than that. We can understand things intellectually, but not have them work through emotionally. That's certainly the case for me. But it was the unhappiness of myself, despite my success, and the unhappiness of my family that impelled me to start examining what's going on with me.
Well, let's continue that examination and get a quote from your book, shall we? This is from The Myth of Normal. Sheldon, top of page 2. Let's bring this graphic up. No person is their disease, and no one did it to themselves, not in any conscious, deliberate, or culpable sense. Disease is an outcome of generations of suffering, of social conditions, of cultural conditioning, of childhood trauma, of physiology bearing the brunt of people's stress and emotional histories, all interacting with the physical and psychological environment. It is often a manifestation of ingrained personality traits, yes, but that personality is not who we are any more than are the illnesses to which it may predispose us. I mean, that does raise a bunch of questions, so let's dive into this. What role do you think individuals play in their own illnesses?
They play an unconscious role, so nobody deliberately brings on illness for themselves. But let's say that you grew up in a home where when you were angry as a child, you were punished. As happens in a lot of families, as a matter of fact, psychologists, some will advise parents that an angry child should be made to sit by themselves so they come back to normal, quote unquote, from a very famous book by a Canadian psychologist. Well, if the child gets the message that their anger, which is a totally natural emotion, by the way, built into our brains, but if the child gets the message that the anger is not acceptable, there's no room for it, then in order to be acceptable to the parents and not to be rejected by them, the child will unconsciously push their anger below the surface. They'll repress the anger. The child doesn't do this deliberately or with any conscious sense, but they'll do it as a matter of making connection with the parents. Now, the repression of anger, on the other hand, because of the mind-body unity that again has been demonstrated by science, although again unappreciated by the medical profession, when you repress your healthy anger, you're also repressing your immune system, because the immune system and healthy anger both serve the same function of protecting your boundaries. When you pushed on the one, you pushed on the other. That makes you more predisposed, as many studies have shown, to autoimmune disease later on or to malignancy. Now, you didn't do it deliberately or consciously with any awareness. Repressing your anger was your way of surviving your childhood environment, but that repression then becomes part of your personality, and in the long term, it undermines your immunity. So the benefit of realizing this is not simply it's not a question of blaming yourself for having brought on your illness. I mean, nobody's to be blamed for childhood patterns unconsciously adopted. But if you recognize it and if you work on it, you can become much healthier as an adult. And I've seen that over and over and over again. I've seen people do very well with autoimmune diseases once they get rid of these childhood patterns that were ingrained in them as a matter of survival. So we're not just talking about theory here, we're talking about healing and possibility.
Do you believe the increasing political toxicity, both in real life and on social media, contributes to this?
There's an American psychologist who came up with a line called a new disease called headline deficit disorder or headline stress disorder. I think the increasing toxicity, vituperation, hostility of political life adds to people's stresses. It makes people more defensive, more scared, more suspicious of others. And I think it contributes to ill health.
Let's pull up another quote of the book here and spend our remaining moments talking about healing, because that sounds like a really good thing to do. It all starts, you write, with waking up. Waking up to what is real and authentic in and around us and what isn't. Waking up to who we are and who we're not. Waking up to what our bodies are expressing and what our minds are suppressing. Waking up to our wounds and our gifts. Waking up to what we have believed and what we actually value. Waking up to what we will no longer tolerate and what we can now accept. Waking up to the myths that bind us and the interconnections that define us. Waking up to the past as it has been, the present as it is, and the future as it may yet be. Waking up most especially to the gap between what our essence calls for and what normal has demanded of us. And my question is, does everybody have the wherewithal to do this?
Everybody has the potential to do it. The healing is a capacity that nature gives to all creatures. The question is, will they have the impetus to do it? And once they have the impetus, will they have the support to do it? So I think my experience as a physician, as an individual, as somebody who's done a lot of healing work in this world, is that the potential is inside everybody as long as there's consciousness. But it does demand waking up to those and seeing the way things are. It means losing our illusions of our own lives, about our society. It does mean waking up to the fact that what is considered normal in the society is neither natural or healthy in many, many ways. And we need to do better, and we need to do differently.
Normal's so overrated, isn't it?
Normal is highly over. Well, in the medical sense, it's good. Like there's a normal temperature range outside which you can't live. So in that sense, normal is what's healthy and natural, or a certain level of blood acidity. If it's too high or too low, you can't live. In that sense, normal is what's healthy and natural. But we make the assumption that what we get used to in this society will be considered a norm is also healthy and natural. In many ways, it is not.
Right. Now, you've traveled all over the world. Is there one country in particular you think has got this figured out better than others?
I wish I could tell you. Well, there's some countries where there's more of an ease. I mean, I was in Portugal recently, and people there are really friendly, and there's a kind of an ease about them. There's a kind of a smile. There's a kind of an acceptance. They also have the most sensible drug laws, by the way, of any country in the Western world. I'm not saying they've got it all figured out, but they're still more connected. There's more of a sense of communality, of belonging, and of just ease in this world. I'm not holding up Portuguese society as some kind of ideal. I don't know enough about it, but I certainly noticed the atmospheric difference in a country. So some people do it better than others, but overall, in this globalized world, we're all suffering from the same malaise.
If there then, just in conclusion, if there were one thing people who either read your book or hear about your book through this interview, if they could take away from it and change their lives in that way to make themselves healthier, what would you recommend?
Yeah. It's that there's a true self that belongs to all of us, and betraying or getting disconnected from that self is one of the impacts of trauma, and it's one of the impacts of this society that in so many ways is so artificial. So getting back to our true selves is both possible and necessary.
Didn't Shakespeare say, "To thine own self be true," 400 years ago? This is not new advice.
Shakespeare put the words in the hands of a total hypocrite, in the mouth of a total hypocrite, Polonius, in the play Hamlet. Nevertheless, the words are absolutely true, and it's the best advice anybody can give you.
Well, it's also true that it has been a joy having you on this program. We know you've been on before. We appreciate you being on again. We'll remind people the name of your book is The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture, and we're glad that it's brought Dr. Gabor Mate to our program from Victoria, British Columbia. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.